Hey, there we go. So we are live. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If anyone's watching yet, if not, I'm just talking to myself. So here we are today, joined by Bumper, who's below me. Ian's back as a sort of continuation on last week, and obviously Matt, who I do this in conjunction with, who's to my left. Hope you're seeing it that way. So what I thought I wanted to do today was do like a video sort of delving into horror, exploration into horror, people's love of it, and that's why we've got Bumper and Ian here, because they're both sort of horror aficionados. I'm not. Matt isn't too much either, but we may learn something along the way. So I wanted to get a couple of people who were fans of the horror genre, and so I could sort of explore the love of it, because I'll be honest, I don't get it. And that sounds really bad. There are some horror films that I like, don't get me wrong, but they're sort of mainstream horror. And I know horror's a massive genre, and it crosses into so many different things. Like some people would put Jaws in as a horror film, even though it's my favourite film of all time. I wouldn't say it's a horror film, but that's what I'm saying. The genre is massive and encompasses so many different things that I found when I'd done a video of horror. I did actually have quite a few horror films, more than what I actually thought I would, considering I don't think I really, I don't want to say I don't like it as a genre, but it's not my go-to genre. So I thought, being Halloween as well, sort of perfect time to bring it up, because it's in the minds of everyone. But I know that Ian himself has got thoughts on that as well, because he's mentioned them to me. But yeah, so if we just go around the room, say our hellos to everyone, a little blurb about your channel, and maybe, and then we'll start exploring this horror, this love of horror that people have, to try and help me understand, and maybe Matt understand as well. So Bumper, we'll go with you. We'll work down and around. Oh no, it's that way. Down and around and up.
I got confused with that earlier.
I
know. Just promoting the channel. Is just called Bumper's Movies. Bumper's just my nickname. I just went with the obvious title, and I've had it so long now, there's no point changing it. But it's just the usual, the odd review. My mainstay was really my unboxings, but I've not had it in a while. I haven't really had much coming out, particularly my fancy that I wanted to spend the cash on, really. But doing the Video Nasty journey with Trev, so that's my bread and butter on the channel at the moment. And I do a weekly release calendar video, just going through all the 4Ks and the Blu-rays that coming out right across the world. Do get out for a Monday morning, so people know what they look for. And yeah, that's about it, really. Just your standard fare.
But you are big into, you do like Video Nasties, don't you? It is a,
oh yeah,
you've got a Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing behind your head there.
Yeah, that's just to cover up the light switch production value.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I like Video Nasties, but when I was growing up, I was more into your Jasons and your Freddys. The Video Nasties, because it was so difficult to get on VHS anyway, until I was about the tender age of 20. I'd probably only ever seen The Evil Dead and The Exorcist, even though The Exorcist turns out wasn't a Video Nasty anyway. All this Italian Splatterfest stuff, I'd never seen it. I was always a bit put off by the artwork, because I don't know if you've seen some of the cover art on some of these Video Nasties, but oh my God. But as I got older, and I scratched every other itch in, on my horror journey, the Video Nasties, I've been bubbling up to do it for about 3 years. But Trav will tell you, it's hard to get the film. Some of them, you either got them imported from America, and you're talking 30, 40 quid just for a standard Blu-ray, or some of them you just can't get at all. So, unless you're lucky enough to find a crappy quality version on the internet somewhere. So that's the way it goes. But yeah, of course, love Video Nasties. Got a newfound love for them, yeah.
So cool. So you do watch some of the foreign ones and all that sort of thing, like you said. So we've got...
I'd say European and Korean horror, my main bag. So yeah.
All right, cool. So that's a great insight to have into it, because I don't know. Yeah, all I've seen the releases. I've never watched anything from that sort of you know, of that ilk. So that's a great insight into this exploration, so we say. So Ian, yourself, because I know that your love for horror goes back decades.
Well,
being that
it's yeah. With me, it's everything I do, like review, is I have passion for whatever, whether it's collecting and in films. I'm not just totally stuck in horror. I like sci-fi, but this has actually raised a lot of questions in my mind, actually, which is going to be interesting. Is looking, it's labels really. When it's all coming down to labels, it's like you, AJ. Often I keep going. You keep saying, "Well, I don't really like. I'm not really into horror. It's not my first sort of call." But it's interesting nowadays. You are encompassing a lot more into horror because of the labels. And I don't want to go. I'll start rambling on again. But I'm always interested in history of everything. History always interests me, and for me, horror. I'll just ask you this question. If you're in 1930s, right, and somebody says, well, what do you like? And you say, oh, I love horror films. People's idea of what a horror film is it's a much more narrower idea. It's basically the Universal pictures of the Frankensteins and those kind of films. Like nobody would even think of saying thrillers have horror connections. The development of the thriller becomes film noir. Now, film noir is like a darker place. When you're going into darker places, you're going into horror as we see it nowadays. So what I'm saying is that the idea of these labels has changed such a lot over the years. Like monsters. I mean, when I was young, monsters, creature features, they were often like for kids. And the monsters were different. Whereas now creature features are part of the horror thing. And then you go into sci-fi. Where does sci-fi begin and end and go into the horror? You know, again, when I was younger, sci-fi was sci-fi. It was all about aliens. It was all that kind of thing. Societies, looking at societies. There was no saying, oh, that's a horror film. So I'm just going on. But that's the kind of thing that we're looking at, is labels. What is horror?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's great again to have your insight, because it does, you know, it does go into, because you're a big fan of the sort of Hammer horror and all that sort of stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
So again,
definitely.
Wonderful insight. And Matt, what about yourself? What's your affiliation with horror? How do you feel about it?
I mean, obviously growing up, very much the Hammer horror, you know, watching Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, you know, the old Dracula films that we got, Frankenstein, Werewolf, all the classic characters that you had back in the day. So they're very much love watching those, because they're very nostalgic. Yeah, I suppose, you know, if you was to ask a child about horror, they would straight away say Dracula or Frankenstein, you know. So certainly those. Obviously, this coming week, I've dedicated from Tuesday onwards looking at the Paranormal Activity films. Now, obviously, that's another subgenre, more recent subgenre of horror, the found footage genre. Now, initially, when I started getting into the found footage, I wasn't a big fan of it, but it's actually grown on me. If it's done well, it can be quite engaging. And I've always liked the paranormal. I've always had a fascination with it. When I was about 10 years old, I actually lived with a poltergeist. for about a year.
Sorry. Sorry.
Married was you, or
What's that?
married was you, or
Yeah.
to the poltergeist?
No, yeah. No, when I was 10 years old, my parents owned a restaurant, and we actually had a poltergeist. Used to have like pots, like sort of pots and pans on the wall as decoration, like the sort of gold pots, brass, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And there was a particular pot lid that used to be taken off of the wall and put onto the table, and this would happen all the time during the opening hours and closing of the restaurant. I also experienced once. My dad had a bar built. He had a restaurant where it was non-licensed, but you could bring your own bottles of wine in. Customers could bring their own bottles of wine. So I had this bar, and it had these drawers, cutlery drawers. And it was one Sunday morning. Dad didn't open the restaurant on a Sunday, but sister and I were in there. We used to live above the restaurant, and in a flat above. And sister and I were having breakfast in the kitchen, which was literally backed onto the front of the restaurant. And literally outside of the kitchen door was this bar. And I can remember sitting there with her and literally hearing, there was nobody out. Mum and Dad were asleep upstairs. And I can remember literally hearing the cutlery drawer going in and out. Bang, 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 4 or 5 times. And it frightened the life out of me. And I just literally legged it up the stairs to the flat, leaving my poor sister there on her own. So that was my real experience of poltergeist activity. And ever since then, I've always had a fascination with the paranormal. And for me, horror is those sorts of films, because I've got an experience of it and a connection with it, I suppose. So for me, yeah, that's really my go-to. I find that horror more compelling than, say, the slasher films with Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers. For me, if I've seen one, I've seen them all. But you know, I appreciate their love films and people love them, but yeah, certainly for me is the paranormal films.
Okay, all right, that's interesting, and your story is very interesting. So much so that I'd love to explore it sometime, because I like exploring those sort of stories and finding an explanation that could possibly answer that outside of the paranormal. I like it's just, yeah, whenever anyone brings me a story like that, I start thinking, what could another explanation be than poltergeist? It intrigues me, because you know. But talking about your love of found footage, just to say Jesse's here. Hi Jesse, how you doing? Who says the Blair Witch is horrible because it's so realistic and could happen for real. I will say that it is horrible, so much so that it gave me real bad motion sickness when I watched it, and I had to go to bed after for about 6 hours and sleep it off. Never visit it again, and actively avoid found footage films for that reason, because of that one. But yeah, do you guys like the Blair Witch?
The thing with the Blair Witch is, the movie itself is not as good as the reputation it holds, but they had such a good marketing scheme leading up to the release of the film, with all like the fake newspapers, the fake internet articles of the witch being real. You know, they had this documentary style of them interviewing townsfolk, where the townsfolk were telling them the stories. So it done such a good job in the PR department that really the quality of the film comes second. To me, I'm like you. I don't like the motion sickness of it. You know, I am a found footage fan. You know, it's a bit over the top in the Blair Witch. And it never really gives you the ending you want, really, after spending an hour and a half, you know, listening to them scream. But I respect it for what it did. You know, we'll touch on this later because I got stuff to say about it, but it's one film in a small category of game-changing horror films. You know, when it came out, it initiated a huge ripple effect of millions of other found footage movies. You know, and that's testament to the power that it had on the movie world, really. Like, you know.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. It's an impactful film. Not a great film, but an impactful on the future of how films were made for a while, at least. Like Die Hard did with action and things like that. Yeah. So what about you, Ian? What's your thoughts on the Blair Witch?
The Blair Witch, at the time, I thought, there's an actual reaction sometimes inside of me. That if there's too much publicity or people talking about something, about how great it is, my natural reaction is to be, it's probably not going to be like that. And when I did see it, it was enjoyable, but I couldn't understand why everybody was going over the top about it. It just, and I think I've seen it now over years, and I still have that feeling that it's not as great as it thinks it is. But on the other hand, I can see its importance. I'm at it again with history, but I can see it is important because it set off the whole idea of filming like that. I think perhaps there has been better movies, actually, found footage movies made since of that kind of style. I'm thinking of Wreck. Wreck is a great one. I think that is just so spot on. It's what Blair Witch Project should have been, really. But obviously Blair Witch didn't have that experience. But I think something like Wreck, it just hits it perfectly. It's just got that wonderful feel to it, what you want, and it gets scarier and scarier, really scary towards the end, particularly of Wreck, when everything just breaks down. And it's a wonderful film, Wreck. I think people perhaps don't talk enough about Wreck, or perhaps they do. It's such a good film, that. And Blair Witch, I've got to acknowledge it. Yeah.
Is it Spanish? It's a Spanish film.
Yeah, that's right. They've done a remake of it in America, but the Spanish film is just excellent. Yeah.
So what about you with Blair Witch, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I probably sort of echo what Ian just said. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of hype about it, and whilst I watched it, and it didn't sort of live up to the hype. But I agree. I think in sort of terms of sort of movie history, it kind of set that subgenre of the found footage. Certainly, brought it to the mainstream, shall we say? So, but it's not a film I'll go back to.
No, cool. So for me, I mean, horror for me, because I didn't get around to saying, like I said, I'm not. It's so difficult. I say that I don't. Okay, horror's not my go-to genre. Not like what it is for other people. I will watch some mainstream horror. As a kid, I grew up on, being that I was born in like sort of mid-70s, so I grew up in the 80s on, much like you, Bumper, with mine were the Elm Streets, the Friday the 13th, the Chuckies, that sort of thing. And those films have stayed with me now, and I'm still a fan to a degree of those films, and I get enjoyment from them. But I don't know. A lot of horror doesn't work for me. It doesn't work in the endings don't work, the reveals don't work, and this sort of thing. And I know that there's a lot of love out there for horror, and that's why primarily I want to do this chat, to help understand what people get out of it in depth. Because and to be honest, any other time of year, I wouldn't have done a horror chat. I wouldn't have done one revolving around horror, but being that it's Halloween or coming up to, and it's big on people's channels, and I know Ian, you said that you weren't, horror should be sort of basically represented all year round and not just at Halloween.
Right, yeah.
think it's much like
Yeah.
Christmas. Halloween gives people the opportunity to focus on that as a genre more so than they would any other time of year. So I think that's all that is. But certainly,
I just worry that people get indigestion. I do with it. Like, if I hear any more about Halloween Ends, I think I might just go mad. It's ridiculous. Every time I look at a YouTube channel, if there's another review of Halloween Ends, I think that's it. I'll lose the will to live.
I think
It's one film. Oh, for goodness sake.
I mean, a lot of channels are horror based, and they're all gonna have their talk about it. Of course, they are. But I know what you're saying. Me personally, I've not really done anything horror related on the channel this year. I did review Halloween Ends, and I've done a video on how I thought it should have ended. That would have been a more impactful ending. But I've not done anything horror related. Because these people that do 31 days of it, wow, I couldn't do it. And that's something I'd like to talk about as well. Let's just see who else is about. So Jesse says Grave Encounters is brilliant, really well made and effective. I don't know what that film is. I've not seen Grave Encounters. Anyone else?
I think it's another found footage one, isn't it?
I don't know.
It's an Australian found footage movie. It's got a couple of sequels as well. It's your usual setup. Skeptics go into a haunted house. It's like a ghost hunting show, and they end up looking into the real thing. It is well done. It's atmospheric and got some good scares in it. Low budget though.
Is it serious or has it got an element of humour to it?
No, it's serious.
Okay, all right.
Uses a lot of night camera film, like the green sort of tint filming, like it's filming in the dark. So
okay, all right, cool. So Alan's here. Kermit, how you doing, Alan? Hope you're keeping well. Carlos from Eastwood for Life fan.
Hi, Carlos.
Yes, horror movies for me with Universal Hammer, and 70s to 90s for me. The comedy elements, like in the scary movies, were not. I suppose it's liking each to their own. Do you know, for me, actually, I find, because I struggle getting into horror, when there's a sort of element of comedy, I actually manage to get into it easier because it kind of opens another door for me. And I think that's partly the reason why I like the Elm Streets and the Chuckies, because there's an element of humour around Freddy as a character. There's an element of humour around Chucky as a character. It makes it a bit more digestible for me. Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
Do you like Shaun of the Dead? Would you because of that comedy element and that? Do you like that a lot?
I love Shaun of the Dead.
I knew you would.
Yeah,
I knew you.
But that's primarily because. More so because of Space, the TV series.
Yes, excellent series.
I don't actually. I think of Shaun of the Dead, and I don't think horror.
That's interesting.
My mind just goes comedy.
It doesn't go. With horror comedies, very hard to get the sweet point. You either leaning too much into the comedy, too much into the horror. Like Scary Movie is not a great example because Scary Movie is advertised as a spoof. It is a comedy. There's not supposed to be anything scary in it. But Shaun of the Dead, I suppose some bits of it can be quite scary if you wanted to think about it in more realistic terms. But there are some comedy horrors that work well when the horror is quite extreme or intense, and then the comedy moments land to take you out of it a bit, give you a bit of respite, a bit of relax from the craziness that's going on.
So can you give an example of a film that hits that sweet spot that you say?
That's kind of look at my movies by ear because there is way more than one, I think Malignant probably did it. Malignant was so crazy, but it did have a bit of witty banter to it as well, like a bit of comic edge to it. It was just so over the top. So Malignant, I would say, is an okay example, but that was more visually. I'm trying to think of scary horrors with a witty script, but they'll come to me in a bit.
So what about something like Scream?
Yeah, there we are. There's something like Scream. That would be a good example, I suppose. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Cool. Ian, what about yourself? The comedy element with the horror, does that
Would
work
you
for you
think?
or not?
Yeah, I think it can do as well. I mean, why is Evil Dead so popular? Those
Evil Dead,
films,
that's a good example.
because they're
Okay.
so over the top, aren't they? They really are. They're funny. They're just ridiculous, aren't they? Almost. It's like taking gore and extreme, just to the total opposite of being serious. Like, you know, in an Italian slasher film, it's supposedly serious, but and in Evil Dead, it's just so over the top, isn't it? I mean, it's just ridiculous, but it's funny, but enjoyable, you know.
Yeah.
So
The first one,
to me,
the first one
that is perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, the second one. The first one didn't really go into the comedy aspect, though, did it? It was more with the second one.
Yeah.
Evil Dead 2.
Though I found the first one quite amusing, to be honest, but that's just me. That's why I never get scared of movies, because someone's just so daft, but enjoyably daft. You know, even as I say, the most Italian slasher, it can be just so ridiculous that you end up just laughing as well and not being scared by it. You know, even though, and it's often funnier when somebody as intentionally thinks that this is serious. The fact that they're trying to make it serious actually makes it funny to some extent. Not scary. They're not really as scary movies as they think they are, really, because they're just so ridiculous. You know, you can be chopping somebody up. It reminds me of Monty Python in the Holy Grail, when, you know, slicing off the knight is slicing off all the limbs of that, and he's like, "Come on, fight!" It reminds me of that in many ways, because it becomes ridiculous, you know, the slashing and what have you.
Yeah. So, what about you, Matt? Comedy elements, does that work for you or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back quite a few years, but I can remember watching. Do you remember the Munsters, the original Munsters? That was sort of, you know, comedy horror, wasn't it? And I can remember the sort of Carry On Screaming, really enjoying that. That was, you remember those? Yeah. So yeah, sort of, yeah, a few things like that. And yeah, I enjoyed Shaun of the Dead. Certainly, yeah, very much more on the comical side. But again, that's another genre, isn't it? Which you've got the zombie genre. Now, is that horror or is that more? I don't know. It's a subgenre of horror again, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Kermit saying hello to Carlos. Gareth's in. Video Tasties. How you doing, Gareth? Hi, Sir Alan. Kermit's Ghost. It's back and forth. Mervilla watching from the Philippines.
Oh, yeah. That's a friend of mine.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, she's cool. Yeah.
All right, good. That's great. So Eastwood for Life, Carlos says, as for modern day great horror movies, It, Hereditary and The Conjuring 1 and 2 I really liked. Horror movies got to keep one in fear and one on the edge of your seat. Comedy horror, no. Now Hereditary, I didn't get to the end of. I switched Hereditary off. I didn't like it. I enjoyed the It films, and I enjoyed The Conjuring. I actually quite enjoy the Conjuring franchise itself, the whole of it, even the films that are linked around it. Anyone else got any thoughts on those? Hereditary?
Yeah, I mean, I
love Hereditary. What a fantastic film. It's a film that I've just keep going back to. The performances are great. The way everything is written, I love the dark elements of it. It's so well acted. It's an intelligent script. It's got everything that I'm looking for in that particular area. It's a film that I could just keep coming back. I know there's a feeling that I can understand people just sometimes you just don't connect with films. It's like I don't connect with certain films, but Hereditary I just connected straight away. It's like Midsommar. I think that's another controversial film in terms of people liking or not. Absolutely love both of those films. it just connected with me. And, I can like humor. I love humor, but I also love sort of things. To me, that is like almost what horror should be about. It's exploring darker areas and doing it in a real intelligent way, as well as using the filmmaking techniques involved in it. It's just a feast for me to watch. And because I just love seeing how directors have ideas and how they express themselves, and it goes right through history of directors, and it's good to see modern directors taking a lot from the past and then exploring, what they're doing now. And Hereditary to me represents that. It represents what's good in an art form. It's the real. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, and it never will be, but to me, it connects really well. And I'd like to see more films like that. It's not afraid to do what it does. It's a confident film, and it's a dark film, I admit. And the actors, they're all such great performances in the film. What it brings out of the actors is just incredible. That's it, really. That's what kind of connects me. Same with Midsommar, a film that is just has that extra edge of a lot of films nowadays. It's imaginative to me. It follows a tradition. It recognizes history of filmmaking. It recognizes exactly what a good script should do, that the actors really get onto it. I know a lot of people think it's boring, it's going on too much, and this and that, or the whining, and it's just basically this not very a couple's relationship is breaking down, and they find performance whiny. They find it. There's all sorts of. I've heard all sorts of criticism, but I don't find it like that. But it's just,
I just think
it's just everybody sees things differently sometimes. Yeah. And I just see it in the tradition. It's good folk horror. I'd like to see it as folk horror, really. To me, it's just like following on from Wicker Man in a modern way.
Yeah, very much like. Shock value I found with that film. I must admit, there's actually one scene in it was actually surprised me. It was starting to laugh at it because it was just so ridiculous. At the end, there's a scene with one of the main guy who has to perform an act, shall we say, and I just thought this is just batshit, crazy. Sorry for swearing there, but I just found myself actually laughing and then thinking, why am I laughing at this? But ridiculous stuff, really. But not a film I would revisit.
What about you, Bumper? What about things like Hereditary and as Ian brought up, Midsommar? Are they your cup of teas?
Yeah, I'm just suffering with a bit of background noise a minute, Evie, but my kids are going out the door now, so we're going out.
Right.
I could talk all day about Hereditary. I'm glad that Ian picks up on the smart writing, the scripting, because it's just fantastic. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but as the story develops, like Toni Collette's character, she meets this older woman, and this older woman, she sort of dupes her into doing a seance, and it's just the way it's all planned out meticulously. Like I said, the writing is just incredible. I know what Matt says at the end.
Back in a minute.
And that's your that's like your human instinct, where something's so crazy that you see it in front of you, like your instant reaction is to laugh at it, but. What you've got to do with Hereditary is, and this is what I love doing with movies anyway, maybe Ian does this, I'm not sure, right? But I love a movie that I watch, and then the first time, I don't really get it. But there was enough there to make me want to find out more, so I'll go on fan forums on the internet, I'll watch deep dive videos on YouTube after I've seen it the first time, but then I'll go back to it then, armed with all these new clues, because I'm not one of these would go watch a film and spot everything. There's scenes in Hereditary that take place in darkened rooms with his ghosts up in the corner or characters up in the corner. I wouldn't have spotted them if it wasn't for these deep dive videos on YouTube. And when you put it all together and you go back and watch it, if you don't blow your socks off, then you're not built for that sort of film, I suppose. It's just not your scene. But yeah, I'm with Ian. I think it's incredible. Really quick on it, same as the old one. They can't do the second part of it right. They can do the first part right. Everyone knows part one, Kids in Peril. Great, get a good hip cast in it. Everyone relates to the characters. It's just basically Stranger Things with a claim. But no one can do the grown-up segment right. I don't know why. In the new one, the cast is way too glitzy. James McAvoy don't need to be in it. Jessica Chastain don't need to be in it. The comedian guy with the glasses, can't what his name is, don't need to be in it. But still, whatever. Conjuring 1 and 2, yeah, all over James Wan. Possibly my favourite modern-day director after Guillermo del Toro. First one's amazing, probably the best haunted house movie ever made, and that even includes Poltergeist and The Changeling. Number 2 is good, set in Britain, Enfield Haunting. Anyway, when by you, Matt, where you used to knock about Enfield, or were you Poltergeist?
Well, I'm going to come on to the Conjuring 2 I quite enjoyed, but there's a lot wrong with that story. The Warrens weren't really sort of involved in that hardly at all. Actually, there was a Sky drama that was done with
Timothy Spall,
the Enfield Haunting, and that's a very good mini-series.
The Conjuring 2 would be over dramatized for the sake of the film, but the Warrens in general, I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but they were just complete frauds, from the get-go, really, do you know what I mean? So but obviously that doesn't make a good movie, does it? So but they played well by Patrick Wilson, and Vera Farmiga's one of my favorite actresses in the genre. Bates Motel, probably one of my favorite shows ever. But
they're both very
sorry,
good.
Going a bit off track there.
No, that's all
what
right.
about the Insidious films? Have you watched those? That's Patrick Wilson as well, isn't it?
And James Wan as well. Well, first two were James Wan anyway.
Yeah.
Patrick Wilson's directing a new one. They got a new one coming out.
I can watch them, but it's not a genre's not a films genre that I would collect necessarily, apart from the Conjuring 2 and the Paranormal Activity ones. I'll collect those, but outside of that, I'll watch them, but it's just not something I collect.
Yeah, I don't want to spend your hard-earned cash on it, really, if it's not something you gravitate to all that often.
So let's ask a question, because when I see a lot of defense of horror movies in reviews, I see a lot of people talking about the kills. Fantastic kills. It was great when he killed. It's great. And like all they're getting out of it is this sort of bloodlust, shall we say? And I don't get that. I don't get, all right, okay. I could say, like, if I saw a Saw film, okay, there's an interesting, inventive way of killing someone in it, and I get the intrigue in that. But when I see reviews for Halloween Ends and things like this, and it's all going into the reviewers just going into some great kills, and it's like that's their justification for the film being good. Do you get anything out of that element of horror films? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you watch and you think, I love that blood, I love that gore, that sort of a thing?
You have just pigeonholed one of three type of horror fans, gorehounds. There are people out there who simply want to watch a film because of how sick it is.
Okay.
Those people do exist. I do need a little bit of storyline to go along with my grossness, but I'm an extreme horror fan, so I'm into it. I will watch a film just because, like you say, the reviewer said the kills in this are awesome. I would watch it because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have to be a movie that knew what it was, like Terrifier. It couldn't be a movie that was trying to be Schindler's List but only survived because of good kills. But if it's a movie that says this movie is nothing but good kills and that's all we want it to be, then I'm on board. That's just a 70s splatterfest exploitation type movie for me, really.
Okay, so What about you, Ian, with that side of it? Does that side of it intrigue you? That sort of bloodlust, that sort
Not
of...
really. To be honest, the only thing that intrigues me is like one of the reasons I love the Final Destination set films is because the directors are coming up with very clever ideas of how people can die, and I think that works really well. Whereas if you just like watching a normal Italian slasher, I don't think you dwell. I don't personally dwell on the type of kill. I just see it as part of in the story. I see it's sometimes necessary to be there. Some people say, "Oh, well, it's what you don't show that's more important," and I agree. Sometimes in an atmosphere, but to actually show the horror of a serial killer, to me, you have to show. It's good to show what they actually do. I know that sounds a bit gross almost, but you don't get off on it. I won't say I'm getting off saying, oh, but I think it's important sometimes to show what people do. And if people say, well, it's entertainment, you know, well, the film is just the entertainment. It isn't specifically that kill. I mean, you know, you basically could have a film which was just stuck with kills together for some people, and they'd think, oh, fantastic, and I'd be bored. You'd get bored. Wouldn't you get bored after a whole film just full of that? I think I would. I'd get bored. You know, I like something with a bit of intelligence as well behind it, or knowing what it's doing. So I think it's a misconception to say, I mean, it isn't a misconception. Obviously, these people just go on and on about loving the gore. But if you're a film fan, you actually like the film, not just that bit of gore. The horror is such a widespread phrase, anyhow. As I've talked about, it's a label. We have to try and label to communicate how we actually feel about a film. But you know, a good example is house invasion films. I mean, they're very popular, but I was looking up some of these sort of early films. Like there's a film, Desperate Hours, 1955, starring Humphrey Bogart. He's an escaped convict. They did a few remakes on this, and he goes inside a house and he's terrorizing the family. Now, if that was done nowadays, we'd be calling it a horror house invasion film. Yeah. But then it was just down as a thriller, and it was quite horrific. If I've looked back at that, I mean, what he's doing is pretty nasty stuff to the family. Obviously, because of it being in 1955, it's not as explicit, but it's nasty stuff, really. And what I'm saying is that the labels are changed such a lot over the years, and they will continue, I think, to change. So violence has always been there. It's just that with relaxation of censorship, we can now show how violence is. And violence is two parts. Violence is showing how it really is, and also violence is just using it as an entertainment tool. And that's where, you know, you've got a mixture. People will say, well, you shouldn't just using it as an entertainment. It's just another facet of expression, really. And that's, so what was you just mine.
That's cool. What was you going to say, Bumper? I know you was going to...
I was only going to jump in quickly to say that, you know, extreme horror works best when there is good character development, when there is a good story behind it, because then it does give you a gut punch. You know, if you're going to make something that's just over the top gore and violence from the first minute to the last minute, like Ian says, it's pointless watching it. You may as well just go on YouTube and search out a compilation of bloody real life gross stuff and just watch that, you know. But if the story's done well, then the violence can really elevate it for me, because it can really give me that gut punch that I'm looking for. And the other thing, pick up what Ian said, is horror fans, we don't get off on watching violence. We want to be put through the ringer. We like deep psychological movies, you know, we don't want to leave a movie smiling. We want it to be in the back of our psyche for the next 6 weeks. Like, oh my God, what the hell? Like, you know what I mean? Not everyone likes that buzz from a movie. Some people want to leave all cheery and happy, but I don't. Like, I want to be put through the ringer. I don't know. You might not understand that, but I like to, that's what I like to do when I watch.
No. That's a good. That's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something I hadn't considered. So, what about you, Matt? What's your thoughts on the sort of what did you say it was, Bumper? 3 types. What are the 3 types then? The 3
types of horror fans. So
they're gorehounds. Yeah,
gorehounds. Then there's people. Then there's thrill seekers who are too scared to go jump out of an aeroplane or go on a roller coaster. Some people like to lift their endorphins, but they want to be in the comfort of their own living room, the comfort of their sofa, so they know deep down they're safe, but they still want that buzz. And then, the third one, the most popular one, is me, you, Ian, the ones who grew up on it, the ones with the nostalgia of the VHS tapes, watch Chucky, watch Jason, watch Freddy. It just formed part of your life. Like, you might say about someone, oh, as soon as that kid had a football at his feet at age 6, he never put it down. You say that to me about a VHS horror. As soon as I had that first horror in my hand at the age 6 VHS, it's been part of my life since. I just have not been able to put it down. And that comes not just films, community-wise, going to horror film festivals, you know, meeting people who I never usually meet in my normal social circle, really getting involved in the whole scene, you know?
Okay, all right, cool. So Matt, what's your take on that sort of gorehound side of it, that sort of bloodlust violence that I asked?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I suppose depending on the type of person you are, obviously, yeah. I think we all like to be scared to a degree, and I think I agree with what you're saying, Bumper, about certainly for me and a lot of people. You've got that comfort of knowing that you're in your own home, you're safe, but you still want to have that kind of that scary element at times. I find the gore stuff, I'll watch it, but I'm kind of looking away because it's like, oh, you know, it's something that, yeah, but if it's done too much, then you, like you said, Ian, you're kind of laughing because it becomes a bit comical, like the Final Destination stuff. A lot of the stuff is just like, yeah, a bit ridiculous after a while, isn't it?
You know when you're in that territory, though. If you're ever watching a film and the reason you're watching it is to see how creative and sick they can make the next kill, that means you're rooting for that cast to die. So you've got really no investment in the character. The movie does just come about, you know, how cool the next kill is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, it's definitely more about like the story and the characters involved in it.
That's what I mean. When someone dies in a film that you're taking serious and it affects you emotionally, that's when you get the illicit thrills that I like with horror.
I mean, I will say with Midsummer, that film stayed with me for days.
I know it.
And it was just like, you know, wow, that was quite shocking. And yet my son, who is, well, he's in his 20s, he watched it and he was like, well, I don't know what the big fuss was about. He didn't interpret it in the same way. So I think it's very much down to the individual. And
that's going back to the subgenres. That's why there's so many subgenres, because everybody finds something different scary. I'm like you, Matt, you know, I think horror should be supernatural. Otherwise, it's just a thriller if it's a man in a mask. But which I still enjoy, don't get me wrong. But for something to be classed as horror, for me, really should have some sort of supernatural element, really. But you know, a lot of it's just put into the violence. Like, I was going to bring this point up at some point, but I might as well do it now because Ian mentioned it. I always do what I call the blockbuster challenge. So I always think to myself, when I watch a new modern movie that everyone's calling horror, I think, if this movie was in blockbusters in the 90s, which section would it be in? And I tell you now, 7 out of 10 movies that come out these days that are cast as horror are not horrors. They're gangland thrillers. They're, I don't know, loads of different varieties, but it's just because they got a little bit of violence and slow burners. Maybe nothing happens and then someone gets stabbed at the end. So it's like, well, that's not a drama. That's a horror. It's like, well, is it?
So do you think that? Do you think that's being done to sort of target the horror audience to get more people over to the film, perchance?
Probably. I mean, they do try sneaky ways. I mean, that's why a lot of movies come out PG-13 to reach a bigger audience. But horror is such a large umbrella term now. There's so much falls under it. And it is difficult to know what people mean when they say they like horror these times. Like, if I make it work by saying, I love horror films, I might give him some sick French extreme movie. And he'd give at me saying, well, when I said I like horror films, mate, actually I meant, I don't know, some PG-13 film has just come out recently. I don't think off the top of my head, but do you know what I mean? There's certainly different levels to horror, and so much gas in now that it just does my head in, really. Like Jaws. Jaws is not a horror film. And I argue till I blew in the face. Yeah, it'd be horrified if you were stuck in the water with a shark, but the purpose of the filmmaker wasn't to make a horror film. So I think that's where it starts, you know. What the director's trying to, if the director says he was not making a horror film, he wasn't making a horror film.
No, that's right, absolutely. So, Carlos says, do you think that modern day horror films lack ideas, as we seem to get 100 sequels and reboots from Hollywood, where Asian horror keep coming up with fresh ideas? What's your take on that? Because me personally, okay, I know obviously it's a money making exercise when they're doing a reboot or a sequel. There's brand recognition, which means instant. You're going to make money instantly from that. And obviously we do get the sort of American remakes of the Asian films. So are the Americans sort of letting the Asian film market take the risk, and then they're stealing that idea once they know that there is a market for it? What's your thoughts on that one? Well, I don't know why I put the thingy down there. Do you think too many sequels? And
I think it's too many sequels in all areas of films, to be honest. It's not just horror. I mean, to me, I can understand why studios might do it. A, because they've got a lack of ideas, and B, they think, oh, it made a lot of money last time, let's try and make some more money. But of course that doesn't, I mean, for instance, in horror world, why would you make a sequel? Why would you remake Carrie, for instance, something like that? There's quite a few films like that. Why on earth would you remake a film which is brilliant already? What can you add to it? So therefore, you must come to the conclusion that they're just trying to make some more money out of the original film by remaking it. What is the point? I mean,
exactly.
What is the point? You're not going to get anything any better, are you? Are you really going to get anything better than the original? You're not.
No.
You're not.
And that's
so
all
why
around
do it?
in all facets of film, isn't it? Disney with their remakes, films like RoboCop being made. You know, so many instances of it. Why not take something that's a poor idea, an idea that failed, and try and do something
and lift
better?
it up? Yeah.
Take something
I agree.
Recognized and the classic that you're going to drag down.
Yeah.
What are you going to say?
I will say with RoboCop, I will defend the remake, and I know a lot of people don't like that film, but I actually do quite like it because it focuses more on the psychological side and how he deals with becoming a robot, which it didn't have the action that the first film had, and you can't take that away, but I think that had a lot of potential, that remake, and I think they were quite brave in sort of trying to go down the psychological side of things. So I think sequels can be done well if they try and have a different element, a different way of looking at it, turning it on its head and doing something different. But if you're just going to do a like for like remake, like Ian said, what's the point?
Bumper, what were you going to? You were going to say something. I did sort of see you. Or have you forgotten?
Well, I mean, this is a common theme in the horror community when I'm on Twitter and stuff. People moaning about the lack of ideas in Hollywood. First of all, I don't think Hollywood lets Asia or Korea take the risk. I think is more than they let them come up with the ideas and then
Mm.
copy the ideas rather than let them take the risk, because these Asian films, they do seem to have some out there ideas, yeah. But on about remakes and reboots and sequels, the problem is, there will always be a crowd for them. Like you say, they're a guaranteed money maker for the studios. There's no real risk in them. But my issue is that if we didn't have them at all, for every Halloween Ends and the Fog remake, there is The Hills Have Eyes, there is The Last House on the Left, there is horror remakes. Well, The Thing is a remake, I suppose, if you wanted to throw that in the mix. The Fly. I think what you want
get
to do
some
is,
work.
yeah. But Carrie, the reason why Carrie don't work is because the first film is so awesome, whereas some might argue the original Hills Have Eyes really isn't that great, or some might argue that the original Thing or the original Blob, they were so old, they didn't have the budget to make the movie what it should be. So you can understand when they remake movies like that, but take a movie like Carrie or The Wicker Man, a movie that can be enjoyed the same now as it was back then, with any generation, or the picture quality might be a bit grainy and whatever. But to shove Chloe Grace Moretz in it and a ginger lady from Hannibal, just to get bums on seats is just needless. Like I said, it only works if I think the original wasn't that great in the first place.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
A good example is Invasion at Body Snatchers. I really love the original one, but the remake with Donald Sutherland is just incredible film. It's taken that film, which already was a good film. There's an example of where I'm contradicting myself. Yeah, but there are very few examples I can think of like that.
Yeah, no, they are few and far between, you're right. But to abolish all remakes and sequels, the thing I've found is the best remakes are the ones that got directors who are firmly in the horror genre already and will want to make a movie that people are going to say, oh my God, the director nailed it. No one in horror really wants the reputation of making the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, but because the guy was just an MTV music director and he'd never directed a film in his life and didn't really even have a horror thing into it, it was just a payday for him. The film turned out crap. The cast weren't interested. The director wasn't interested. But then The Hills Have Eyes, Alex Ajar, who's a mad, crazy horror fan, done loads of wicked French films and everything, he took The Hills Have Eyes and made it a passion project and served it justice. That's got to be there as well.
Some great points. Very good points. Well said. So Dan's here. Dan's Man Cave. Hi, everyone. Hope all is good. Managed to finally get a sit down and enjoying this chat. A few points I was going to talk about later, but now won't be. But was my revisit of Army of Darkness. Okay, all right, cool. So Dan was going to go live later, but he's not now. I hope everything's all right there, Dan, if you're still watching. So Army of Darkness then.
Yeah, that's Screen Book, Steel Book.
Yeah, it's a lovely release, that one. See, for me, that was my doorway into The Evil Dead. To be honest, I think The Army of Darkness was the first one I saw. I then went back and watched Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead 1. Army of Darkness is obviously not a film that I don't really class as horror at all. No. Would you? Would you say that's a horror film? For me, it's just a fun sort of.
It's like it's a fantasy. Yeah. Fantasy flick, isn't it? But it's done in the vein of like old Ray Harryhausen style type movies and things, isn't it? Like.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's not really
effects,
So, Kermit saying hi, Dan. Okay, movie Face Off. Here you go. Movie Face Off, people. If you've seen all these, American Werewolf in London, The Howling, Silver Bullet, and Dog Soldiers. This from Carlos. What's your favourite and why out of those 4? Werewolf movies. Who wants to go first? Not me. Bumper.
Sure, yeah, I have seen them all. Yeah, Dog Soldiers massively overrated. Silver Bullet, good fun 80s movie with Corey Haim and Gary Busey. 80 minutes of just good cheesy horror. The Howling, I love the director, Joe Dante, is it? But I don't know. I don't really like The Howling too much. So the best American Werewolf in London, hands down. My favourite out of the lot as well. but I do enjoy Silver Bullet as well. Dog Soldiers and the Howling, you know, once every 10 years maybe.
Okay. Ian, what about yourself with them four?
Oh.
Have you seen all four of them?
I sound a bit different again. Actually, I'll be honest, I've not seen Silver Bullet, but the other three, no problem at all. I like them all. I really do like them all. I'll start with The Howling. I remember when I saw The Howling at the cinema, and I just loved the whole style, the way it was. It was different. To me, it was very different, and it was good to see a werewolf movie in a different direction from what, you know, it's as much as we can all love Lon Chaney Jr. and all his kind of development of werewolf stories. It's so good to see the werewolf stories developing, and The Howling must stand out as one of those films where we had it in a modern time, and it fantastic. And the ending I love as well of the werewolf of The Howling as well. Great. Werewolf in London, what can I say? It's another one I saw at the cinema. Absolutely loved it. There's just so many great scenes. It's in Yorkshire, of course, at the bit. So obviously Yorkshire, I'm in there. Brian Glover, what a great actor from Barnsley he was. He's there as the landlord. Incidentally appeared in Alien 3, Brian Glover. But what a great film it is. The transformation. Jenny Agutter. Well, I mean, what more can you ask for? I mean, that's it. You know, it's just a great film transformation. Well, Dog Soldiers. Now, I watched Dog Soldiers this week, actually, and I just blown over by it again. I love the ending. I love the way it gets critical. You just sat there wondering who's going to be the next one to meet their fate. I think the design of the werewolves are great. The way, especially when you think of low budget films, fantastic use of the budget, you know, that he had. And when you hear him talking about the film as well, it was obviously such a project of love that he did to get it made. It's just, I just love it. I think a lot of people, we say it's overrated because it's just recently come out and people are discovering it again and realizing, or just seeing it for the first time and thinking, wow, a British picture that is so good. You know, we often, I think, put down our creativity of a British film industry. And there's quite, if we start looking at our history, we have, I sound really patriotic, oh God, but we've actually got a lot of good filmmakers as well in this country. And you know, we should perhaps applaud that. And for a low budget film, Dog Soldiers is an absolute gem. It really is. And that's just my opinion. Before I get shot. But
So okay, so
that's it.
The question, to answer the question, Desert Island. You can only take them three with you. What one is it?
Whoa.
You don't take one of them three films with you, mate. What one is it?
I can't.
You wait for your chance.
Oh, I'll have to, I suppose. Oh, wait.
Come on.
American Werewolf in London.
We got him there.
You got that.
We'd have to have that, I suppose.
All right, Matt. What about yourself with those four?
Well, I've only ever seen American Werewolf in London and The Howling. I've not seen Silver Bullet or Dog Soldiers. I would like to see Dog Soldiers. Obviously, people have been talking about it a lot with that. Second Sight, was it? Second Sight release?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It does interest me, so I'll have to check that out. But yeah, I mean, American Werewolf, again, that's quite a black comedy, you'd call it, wouldn't you? You know, there's a lot of, and you can't take away from the fact that, you know, those and the transformation effect on that is probably one of the best in cinema history. Yeah, but yeah, again, I have to agree with you, Ian, about The Howling. I just think that's a fantastic werewolf film, that one. And The Howling, it'd be for me The Howling. But as I say, I haven't seen Dog Soldiers or Silver Bullet, so I can't comment on those two. But yeah, definitely The Howling.
Okay, so for me, I've only seen 2 of these films, and that's American Werewolf in London and Dog Soldiers. Howling, I'm not sure whether I've seen it. I'm going to say no. If I have seen it, I was very, very young. I've got a feeling I may have seen it, but I'm going to edge on the side of no. Silver Bullet, no idea what it is. If I had to choose one over the others, I'd go Dog Soldiers. American Werewolf in London is a great film, but I've seen it so many times. And it just sort of seems to abruptly end for me. I remember the zombie scene scaring the hell out of me, the Nazi zombies, when I was a young lad. And the fact that a lot of it is set, or some of it is set within the London Underground system, being that I'm in London and float around on that anyway, has the same effect as maybe the film Creep. There's a certain intrigue in that. But again, it's the sort of military presence of Dog Soldiers that it's almost a Predator kind of a feel to it. In you got this military people in the Scottish Highlands. I don't know. I'm talking crap, but I'd have to go. I think Dog Soldiers, but I'd need to watch them back and back to make a final decision. But Carlos, what would be yours out of them out of interest? So Dan said he loved the revisit of Army of Darkness. He was cracking up more than he's done in ages. Comedy horror. It's called, but for me, just comedy. Just like Shaun of the Dead. Yeah, for me, comedy. I don't really rate it as horror. And he's definitely going to watch Ash vs Evil Dead now, which Ash vs Evil Dead is I loved it. Yeah, a good series. And then I've got a load of comments, people just saying hello amongst themselves. I'll come back to Dan's next comment in a minute, because I've got a question, and I want to delve into this to do with the psychological aspect of horror, the psychological effect that it could potentially have on someone. So I'm going a little bit deeper here, and I'm trying to get some thoughts on this. Now, we've seen things like Jeffrey Dahmer. I don't know if you've seen the TV series that's currently on. And obviously he had this penchant for horror films, particularly Exorcist and the blood and the guts of dissection and all this sort of thing. And that played into the aspect of him liking horror films. Do you think there is consumption of horror on a mass degree has a negative impact psychologically on someone, could have a negative impact psychologically on someone? I know that for me, that if I can't do, like I said, I can't do 31 days of horror if I was going to do it. If I do a few days of it, I know that my mind starts edging into a darker place. Not in the sense that I'm going to go out and commit atrocities or anything like that, but I need to step away from that and introduce an element of like, oh, I'm going to watch comedy tonight, to break up that kind of thing, if that makes sense. Do you think there's a correlation in that there, I'm not saying in everyone, obviously, and it might be just a few, but do you think there's a correlation of horror to people doing stuff? Again, another one would be the crap they tried to put on Chucky 3 at the time, when the Bulger, you had that case going on, and they tried to blame Video Nasties, and they blamed Child's Play 3 specifically, which had it pulled off of shelves. Do you think there's see where I'm going?
Yeah,
Who wants to go first? Mumper, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So again, it's a big talking point in the horror community, and especially with the Video Nasty era in the 80s and things. And that Chucky film, Child's Play 3Gs, that was out again all up in the late 90s. I remember really desperately trying to watch that after having one or two. Yeah, no. So my answer to the question on a wider scale is no. Okay.
Mhm.
Alan Jones, right? He's a big horror movie critic from London, right? And I've seen an old talk show thing with him before, after the Jamie Bulger incident happened, and the woman said what you said. People are watching these horror films and then they're going out and copying what they're doing. And he said no. He said horror movies haven't done that to him or the people he knows. Horror movies have actually enriched his life. They've had the opposite effect on him than what you would expect them to have on him. Do you know what I mean? And that's the same with me. They've enriched my life. They give me a purpose, got me into a community, met me friends, things like that. You know what I mean? But for anyone who says they're not influenced by what they see on the TV is a lie, because if you go back to when the Karate Kid first came out, everyone in school was doing the crane kick on each other. So people definitely copy what they see on TV. You just hope that 99.9% of them have got a moral compass and know it's wrong, so they can go and copy it. But people like Dharma, they obviously had a screw loose anyway. They needed something to push them over the edge. They were obviously getting thrills from horror films that normal horror fans don't get. Like I said, we don't get off on it. We just like to watch stuff that's intense. But if you get off on it, then and it will stem from something else. It won't stem. The horror won't make you that nut job. But I guess, if you overindulge in it and you already had the bad seeds in your head, then it could influence you, unfortunately. But then so could an action movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger goes in a police station, shoots 15 people with an Uzi on Terminator or whatever. I don't like to say it, but does that somehow have an effect on any school shootings that have happened in the future? You won't hear it as, but
Yeah, no.
Quick jump on Chucky influencing it. When Charles Bay 3 is pretty damn timid as well. I've got to be fair.
Yeah, I know. I know. I do remember it coming out, and then it was pulled. I don't think it was actually out and out banned, though, was it? It was just a sort of.
It was just one that could be prosecuted if you had it, and so the video stores just wouldn't even bother getting it in the first place, because what's the point in spending 80 quid on a video for some copper to come in the next day and take it, like, in there, I suppose.
Yeah. So what about yourself, Ian?
I think it's typical, really, that society has to find an excuse for something, and at the time, like the video nasties, horror was a great way of saying, oh right, we can blame this for society's ills, we blame this for all the problems, and well, or a film of other, not necessarily a horror film, gets blamed. It's just a classic thing, and what we should just remember is that's all they're doing. They're trying to find blame for whatever's happened. I mean, you can't blame a horror film for a serial killer. Let's face it, think, oh, I've seen all this and I'll just go out and kill a few people. No way. There has to be deep, obviously, problems that have happened in that person's life, which have probably got absolutely nothing to do with films at all. Absolutely nothing. The way your family life is, the way you've been treated yourself, the way you see the world. It's nothing to do with films. And I think people really are really stupid. I'm sorry sometimes, but to actually go around and actually say, oh, this film has caused all this and that, it's just ignorant. It's just plain ignorant. And what it is these groups of our moral guardian people. I'm preaching, but hell with it. They like to blame something. And what they don't like what they see in these films. So, hey, let's go and sort them out with blame that film. And if they get enough people, they start agreeing with them. You only have to look online. You look online and people just jump onto a bandwagon. No thought, absolutely just pure ignorance. And that's what it all is. Horror films are no different from any other form of film. And it's just an excuse. And we should just take it with one large pinch of salt. It's hard to believe that the video nasty thing got so ridiculous, but there was a bandwagon and people jumped on the bandwagon, and that's what happened. Nothing to do with reality and what life is about.
No. Because unfortunately,
that's my preaching.
That sort of bandwagon has been. I'm seeing it in comic books now, like with the Punisher, in that Marvel Comics won't even put a gun into his hand anymore. You have guns in the hands of the bad guys, but the Punisher himself, he's done almost a dozen issues now without picking up a gun. because they don't want a hero holding a gun because of the gun culture in America, the shootings that's been happening, and Disney don't want a hero holding a gun because of those potential implications. Oh, here's a hero going out shooting people. Maybe people will go and copy him. So the same thing's now spreading over into these other, other areas. And what about yourself, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with what you're saying about. I think it all depends on the type of person you are, and like your life experiences. If you're somebody who's disposed to maybe depression, and if you was to be watching a lot of these horror films, it's not really going to help you where you're at. It's going to probably put you into a deeper set depression, which could maybe then affect your mood to maybe either self-harm or do something to somebody else. I tend to agree with what you're saying, Ian, about it's not necessarily the horror film that's doing that, but if somebody is kind of predisposed to suffering with depression or whatever, that's certainly not going to help them along the, sort of watching multiple films like this. It's just going to lower their mood. And so, yeah, from that point of view, I think, again, with the video nasties thing, it probably was an element of it affecting some people in that way. But again, with everything, it gets all blown out of proportion. The majority of people don't get affected by these things. But it's all keeping things in moderation, isn't it? And, putting a sensible hat on these things. But unfortunately, like you say, the politically correct crowd come in and say, no, you can't do this. Stop all these video nasties. Stop this, stop that. Like you say with the Punisher, let's cut all the guns out. Well, are you now going to say let's stop producing like plastic toy guns for kids because they're going to be running around thinking they're shooting people? No, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, they done that years ago, didn't they?
What's that?
They done that years ago with guns. Guns are now got to be brightly coloured plastic ones. The funny thing about that, right, is that I go into a gun shop, and I have done in the past. There was one where I used to live in Coulsdon, and if I wanted to buy a plastic BB gun, it has to be two-tone colour. So it has to be like a blue and a red, or it has to be, they don't look like real guns anymore. But I could go up to the counter, and behind the counter I could purchase a air gun that is obviously far more lethal in a sense, in they don't fire little plastic balls, fires proper ball bearings, and those are standard looking colours. The logic in that one, I don't know. But just to jump forward on the comments, just let you know, Carlos did say American Werewolf in London, greatest werewolf movie for me. Silver Bullet has become my new number 2. So let's jump back to where we were. That was that one. Dan says, also modern horror and the lack of horror and over-reliant on cheap jump scares and just shock value for the sake of being violent, just like the utter rubbish in Halloween Kills. Yep. Seriously, lack of originality in horror movie writing is as rare as rocking horse crap. I can literally only name a handful of horror movies in recent years that I'd rewatch. Bumper or Ian, who wants to go first? If you're watching all the new, I'll leave that up for a minute. If you're watching the newer horror films, do you find there's a lack of originality? Are you revisiting the newer ones or more so the older ones? Who wants to go first?
Both.
Ian.
Ian, sorry. Yeah. But both. I mean, as I say, over recent years, films like Hereditary and Midsommar, to me, are ones that I'm still coming back to now. And I think it's progressing. I always look forward to any new films that are coming out. A lot of them don't always live up to that standard. But there's always hope of people with imaginations, and I think that's there. It's art. It is creative art, and you know, I love history, and that's why I watch so many of the, you know, I love Hammer, as you probably guessed, and that kind of era. But I'm not going to be a Philistine and say, hey, there's note nowadays. There's note. There is. It's where you look. It's, you know, and they come up and they're good films. Just because something isn't necessarily big in the mainstream doesn't mean that there's a lack of innovative ideas. Also, people think Hollywood, but there's more than Hollywood. Filmmaking isn't just Hollywood, is it? It's a big, massive world, and we should take that into account as well. And there are people with a lot of ideas. And so the problem often is getting those ideas onto screen, you know, getting the people, the producers and what have you behind them to actually make the films. And it's a sad state of affairs, but unfortunately, that's how the film industry is. And film producers don't want to take risks either. They'll just stick what has made, they'll look at, say, oh, what's making money at the moment? Oh, this is making money. And therefore they just shove it out, you know, because that's what makes money. Or, as Hollywood does, it actually, Hollywood is about more the film star, let's face it. You have a film star, they're in vogue at the moment. And basically you just chuck a script at them, whatever. And I'll tell you a good example, and this might be interesting, is everybody loved The Rock, didn't they? Dwayne Johnson. And he's done really well at what he's done. But he gets to the point, surely, where he comes along and here you are. And they think, well, he's going to make loads of money. And this is interesting because comes with UAJ talking about Black Adam, about how, you know, he's going to be received in this role. This is what I mean. Hollywood is really about the actors, not necessarily the films or the scripts. And therefore, if there's the most terrible script, they don't worry too much. Just shove the actor in, you know, because he's their box office success. Also, they think. But that's it. Really.
So a lot of what you said before, though, going back, could go into that you're not getting these ideas out there, and that could go back into that argument of all the sequels that we're getting and stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, I agree that. I think in main
content, a fresh idea is not getting out there. So, what about yourself, Bumba? What do you feel about, like, do you rewatch many of the newer ones, or do you find them to be?
Yeah, man, for sure. You know, I was born in 1981, and I'm a massive, massive horror fan, no doubt about it. But there's this kind of stereotypical idea that my favourite genre in horror should be the 80s. It ain't. My favourite horror movies range from about 1998, 99 to about 2015. So I think modern horror is better. The thing with me with old horror is comforting for me. When I talked about earlier about wanting a deep psychological experience, I can't get that from watching an 80s horror. You know, there's an odd couple, you know, deep psychological films, maybe like Don't Look Now, things like that. But the majority of them are just hack and slash fun times. So, yeah, I love modern horror. I'll revisit movies over and over. I think where Dan's problem might lie is because maybe he's not into the genre as much as me. He's bombarded with his commercial stuff that Netflix is throwing at him, or Disney Plus, or the cinema. You know, he's only seeing Halloween Ends coming out, or Evil Dead Rise coming out. But what you've got to realize with horror, and this is why there's so many horror festivals every year, is because a lot of the best horror is independent, and then they'll shop them at these festivals in the hope to find distribution. The horror films that come out now that leave a lasting impression, they ain't the ones that have been rebooted, like your Blair Witches, your Paranormal Activities, your Hereditaries. They are original ideas, and actually they have stood the modern test of time like the older films have done. Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends, it won't be talked about in 10 years' time. But if you want to search for it, and you know the directors, the independent directors you're looking for, and things like that. There's some horror films out there now, you know, they, you know, it ain't rocking horse shit. Let me tell you, some of the films, you know. But like I said, you know, there's a more generic horror appeal to average go movie watchers. I don't want to sound contradicted or condescending or anything, mind, but you know, I'm just saying, if you know where to look, various countries around the world, you can find some good horror these days, better than what you find in the 80s. There we are, I said it.
So that's obviously a bonus of being a horror fan like you are, because myself, I wouldn't even, you know, sad to say, I wouldn't even give these films the time of day, because I'm not in that horror. I don't see it as a genre. So the only stuff I'm really subjected to is that mainstream
exactly
stuff. So all that other stuff just goes under the table, under the radar, so to speak, for me. I wouldn't even know where to start looking for them, or what to watch. Do you know what I mean? So what about yourself, Matt? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what Dan's saying here, I think it sort of spans most genres. You through the decades, you get some really fantastic films, and you get a lot of dross as well. I would quite like to see what the Norwegians could do with horror, because having recently seen a few of their disaster films, I've been very impressed with what's coming out of Norway. I don't know any of the actors, and it's all subtitles, but the 3 films that I've watched on the sort of disaster have been fantastic. Really, really good. Now, I know you said, Bumper, obviously, with the Korean films, they're very good at the horror genre. And was Train to Busan, was that a horror? Korean? Was that Korean?
So that's Korean, but that's a good example. I'm glad you brought that film up, because everyone should watch that.
It's a fantastic film, isn't it? Really, really good.
It's a good introduction to subtitle movies as well, because it's quite fast-paced action, so you don't need to worry if you miss the odd line of dialogue here or there. But the other good reason why you brought it up is because that's a pretty new film. It's an excellent word of mouth, excellent reviews, you know, 90% on Rotten Tomatoes say, but the Americans are still remaking it. They've got a Korean director. Well, he's Asian, sorry. He's Filipino, sorry. Timo Tejando. But, you know, they're remaking it. It's only 5 years ago, and it's amazing. Like, you know, just make everyone watch it. Do a dubbed version if you have to. But yeah, sorry, man. I cut you off.
No, I totally agree with you. But
I think,
so I agree with AJ that, you know, horror for me isn't like the main draw, but I think, certainly you should look outside of Hollywood, because a lot of the main stuff that's coming out of Hollywood, like Ian said, is very much driven with in vogue actors, remakes, rehashes of what we've had in the past. I mean, I think in the 70s there were some very good horror films that came out. Obviously, The Exorcist. I mean, I can't ever see them wanting to remake that again. It'd be ridiculous. I mean, obviously they've had a sequels to that, but yeah, look to other countries, because there are some hidden gems out there, I'd imagine.
Certainly, there's some awesome British horror films, whether you want to go as far back as the anthology days of Amicus, or whether you want to just go back a few years to Eden Lake and the Children. There's
brilliant. Eden Lake.
That was another one. Eden Lake, that stayed with me for a few days as well. Oh, God.
Which one?
Eden Lake.
Eden Lake.
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah. So you don't have to look far from your doorstep, really.
But, yeah.
Proper horror.
Oh, God.
So, question, something that Matt said there that you might be able to answer, Bumper or Ian, is there any horror films from Norway that you know of?
No, I don't know.
Bumper's not. He's saying he's 10 years. What?
Someone in the comments might correct me, because it might be another Scandinavian country. But yeah, there's one. It's called it's on Shudder. It's got part 1 and part 2. I think it's called Cold Prey, and it's about people being picked off one by one in a secluded ski lodge, I think. And that's Norwegian, I don't know. I think they're on Shudder, the both. I think it's called Cold Prey. It's got a dark-haired lady on the front. It's got one of those traditional late 90s, early 2000 covers where you get the cast sort of stood back from each other, you know, like on the screen posters. But yeah, it's called Cold Prey, and there's a second one as well. But I'm not saying you should go and watch it, right? I don't know how great it is, but that's the only Norwegian one I can think of. I know the films you're on about, though, Matt. You're on about like The Quake and The Wave, you know?
Yeah, I really
Yeah, good
enjoyed
films,
that.
mate, good films.
Really enjoyed those. Yeah.
See, you talk about actors. I've been a movie fan all my life. I've never gravitated to actors. I couldn't even tell you who my favorite actor was. If I was to go to the cinema, it wouldn't be because The Rock's got a new film out or DiCaprio's got a new film out. I'm drawn to directors. If you told me John Carpenter had a new film out, I wouldn't care who the cast was. It could be Joe Bloggs and bloody Penny Lane. I'd be there going to watch it. So I'm always drawn to directors, not actors. But you know,
Yeah, that's
again,
good
another one.
point, yeah. No, that's good. Great.
I'll see if I can. So is that what was that? Cold Prey.
I think it's called
I
Cold
might-
Prey. Yeah,
I might check it out.
it's on Shudder. I'm pretty sure it used to be. Maybe they got rid of it now to free up space for more films. But yeah.
Cool. I'll see. Have you written that one down, Matt?
Cold Prey. Yeah.
Okay, so Dan's got a question because I'd done a solo chat the other day, just sort of off the cuff solo chat. Question I asked in my spontaneous stream, you done, because I did bring horror up in that as well, and I was asking people, you wanted to know why people love horror. For me, it's to be scared and go to bed that night, and the movie plays on my mind. Yeah, that's cool. That's a good answer. Great answer. Unfortunately, I don't often get that sort of an effect from horror. Okay, I did watch, although again I wouldn't really cast it as horror, more thriller, and that was The Black Phone. Right. Now I went to bed that night with that on my mind, and that was solely because of the scene where the young girl gets beaten. That's the only reason that went. I thought that, I mean, I nearly turned the film off at that scene. Although you don't physically, you don't see it visually, the aftermath of her and her tears was so sort of genuine and real that it was thingy. But yeah, I can see that, you know, and that's what you're saying, Bumper, about psychological. You having that psychological effect from horror, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what you're sort of. That's what you're
that's what I
sort
look
of.
for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong,
And
man. I don't mind fun horror movies. I'll watch a Halloween just as quickly as I watch something deep and psychological. But you know, that's what I'm looking for out of horror. You know, that's why.
Yeah, you want that sort of. Yeah, you want it to have an impact on you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So I suppose, in a sense, something like Midsummer, which I find to be a rather sick, disgusting film, to be honest with you. The same with X, right?
Okay.
There's probably something to be said for them films in that they have had an impact on me, although it being a negative impact, and I come away with them that they've stayed with me. They stay with me, but not for the reasons I want them to stay with me. But I suppose that the film's been quite effective in what it's done for it to even have that impact itself, as opposed to watching it and then the next day it's just forgotten about. Like Halloween Ends would be forgotten the very next day for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, I
that's
suppose
that's the aim of most horror directors. You know, they want you to enjoy the film, but even if you don't, they want you to leave there with something in your head that could be a future talking point, because that's how a lot of horror grows. You know, word of mouth, and you know.
So I suppose even though I dislike them, they were effective.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But with Hereditary, I switched off shortly after that little girl lost a foot in height.
It's honestly, Hereditary is not for everyone. It is a Marmite movie. I don't defend it because it's each to their own. But yeah, I love it. I do. Maybe you should give it another shot. But you know, I leave that up to you. Like.
So Carlos says movies like first Halloween movie, The Changeling, and The Entity are not extreme horror gore movies, but the story and atmosphere creates the horror. Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I mean, I've not seen The Changeling or The Entity, although I'm aware of The Entity. Not the Changeling, but Halloween certainly. It's more psychological. The first one, and it was after that, wasn't it?
I like The Entity again because that's based on a true story.
Yeah, as well acted as well.
Yeah, the only thing I find with that film is the ending kind of goes a little bit, I don't know, a bit OTT. But the events when the paranormal investigators are in the home with her, and you see all the stuff going on with her, that's quite chilling. Yeah, I do like that film.
Sure.
Actually, I'm surprised that with Halloween, we haven't had people complaining that it's a bit too slow. You know, that's one of the sort of things I hear nowadays. The people, you mentioned this, AJ, but people have no patience, have they? They want get into the kills. They don't.
Yeah.
And Halloween is actually quite a brooding film, isn't it? The original one. It doesn't. It does it very slowly in a way. And that's what makes it so good. A film, the atmosphere. Yeah, that's it.
And
atmosphere.
the music as well.
And not just
The
getting.
music plays a big part in the first Halloween film.
Yeah, build up of tension and that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Films today don't want to. They can't do that. Films are not allowed.
Yeah,
to
the
do
brains can't cope with that.
No.
You know, it seems to me.
Storytelling
Oh dear. You know.
that. So what do you reckon of the Hostel films? Says Mark. Mark Shell. Hi, Mark. How are you doing? So the Hostel films. What's your thoughts on those?
I love them.
I don't mind the Hostel films. Just quickly, I don't mind them. I know they are very gory and very thingy, but I sort of like that sort of the European take, the sort of, you know, stuck out in Europe in these sort of backward places and encountering these and the society of people that they you know, rich people that want to do this. That element of it intrigues me more so than the kills. They are very violent films, but yeah, go on. What's your thoughts? Ian,
I think that the Hostel films play on a lot of tension, I think, and it works well. Yeah, they are gory, but I don't think that matters. The tension is there in the films, and I like the Eastern European aspect. I like the idea of what they're doing about the sort of rich kind of people behind all this, trying to make money. There's all sorts of elements within the Hostel film, which a lot of people I've heard totally dismiss. They don't like the director, and so they kind of dismiss the whole thing. But the Hostels are a good three set of films that work well together. And I like the way the story develops from the first into the second, right to the third one. I think they're a real good modern horror films, and they've got everything there. There's good script, good acting. There's the sense of dread there. There's that uncomfortable. They're not comfortable films. They're a real good set of three films. I know a lot of people don't like them. They find them too much. But I think if you look at them from what they are and how you react watching them, then they're a good set of three films. They work well.
Gents, do you agree with that? Or you got different views on them?
I'm not sure, even if I've actually seen them, to be honest.
Okay.
There's one film that does ring. I can remember about somebody staying in a hostel. But I don't think it's. I think it's another film, so I'm not even sure I've seen them.
Okay, they are very sort of much like the Saw films. They rely on sort of gruesome deaths, imaginative gruesome deaths, shall we say? Yeah. So Bumper, you a fan of those ones?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I like them. I think with Hostel, like I was saying earlier, I think I don't get that psychological deep gut punch, because before I even go into the film, I know I'm going into a film where I want to see people getting tortured, or I'm expecting to see people getting tortured, so I'm not going to build any affinity to any character. It is just going to be, watching how gross these people get butchered. But like Ian says, the tension ramps up in the first one when Jay Hernandez character's trying to escape. I can even remember at the very last scene when the hand comes under the door in the toilet and he cuts the guy's fingers off. I can even remember cheering because I really wanted Jay Hernandez to escape. That's how involved I was with it. So even though it is a torture porn horror, there is other things to be taken from it. You will get involved in the movie, and you will take to the characters. And then number 2 done well by role reversal and turning into the women. And there's the scene where she cuts the woman with the swords over the bath, which is pretty damn horrific. I gotta be fair. So yeah, I like the Hostel films. The third one I've only ever seen once. That's set in Vegas. I don't think Eli Roth was attached to that one, I've got to be honest. But he may have been on production duty, don't get me wrong. But so I can't really comment on the third one. But yeah, I like the first 2. I think they're good. I think people do pile them off as trashy torture porn, when actually there's a bit more meat on the bones than that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Didn't do very good for the Slovakian tourist board, apparently, though. So talking about movies having an effect in the real world, I think Hostel had a negative effect on Eastern European travel.
Yeah, I can see that. Dan said the most pointless horror remake was Psycho, starring Vince Vaughn.
Oh yeah.
I don't stop the shot. You've got a good director like Gus Van Sant. He's a good director. Why does he want to make a movie that's just shot for shot? And then you've got Vince Vaughn trying to be Andy Perkins, which I like the white Vince Vaughn, but he's not Andy Perkins. Andy Perkins got that role nailed down, haven't he? His build, his characteristics. He's just a creepy dude. Like,
well, I mean, if I was watching Vince Vaughn, I'd probably be going into that expecting a comedy. Do you know what I mean? And he's very Vince Vaughn himself. He hasn't got much range. All right, I know he stepped outside of it recently with is it
Freaky?
How many blocks it is and things like that. Freaky. That's still comedy though, isn't it? Freaky's
comedy.
It's
a good film actually. He does play that quite well, but he is one-dimensional. I'm not going to deny it. Like.
But he done the one where he's in the cell block. Where he's got the shaved head, and then dragged across concrete with Mel Gibson. So he has tried, but for the most part, he's very, he's himself. He's like, Vince Vaughn. But yeah, that is a pointless. Here we go. Question for everyone. Which horror movie scared you most back in the day? The Young Team, The Omen scared the hell out of me. Bumper, do you want to go first?
Okay, so I've got 2, right? The first time I seen Pet Sematary with Zelda screaming for a pea soup, I was probably only about 8. I slept in my mother's bed for a week after that, I'm not going to lie. And another one of feedback, you've probably never heard of this film, so I won't dwell on it, but there's a film called The Children. It's called in America, but over here it's called The Children of Ravensback, and it's about these young kids. They go through a toxic waste cloud, and it turns all their fingernails black, and every time they touch someone, they just melt into this toxic sort of goo. And I don't know, just when I was a kid, I rented that and watched it. Oh my God. So it was a trauma movie, so it's probably laughable now. But but Pet Sematary, if you have to give a commercial release because of Zelda and the pea soup, that freaked me out,
Okay, Ian, what about yourself?
I think one of the earliest films to scare me was actually Rosemary's Baby. I know it was a mainstream film, but it was very different looking at a modern life in terms of Satanism and how it was brought in, because it predates obviously The Exorcist. And there's a particular scene in Rosemary's Baby, which even some at censors were rather cutting, is when basically she's sort of raped by what seems to be the devil figure. And so I was quite young when I shouldn't have really seen it, but I was quite young seeing that. That was frightening, because a lot of films I really enjoy, but they don't really scare me. But I remember more seeing that and thinking that was the way it was filmed was very chilling. And even the ending, the fact that when you see the baby's eyes lit up right at the end, I think it's because the couple are so sort of modern. They're sort of a fussy kind of funny kind of couple, and the way everybody is, the acting, they're not all. It's not. I mean, I love Hammer, but it's not like the Hammer version of what these sort of groups are. They're a modern American, group of people in the 1960s, and it's quite shocking. I think it's actually quite shocking seeing, these people involved in this sort of cult worship thing, and it's obviously the way the film develops is quite frightening, with Mia Farrow in that central role as she's realizing all this stuff's going on. No one believes her, and she's got to try and escape and get out of it. It's such a great film, and maybe that is should be seen a lot more, actually, Rosemary's Baby, but unfortunately it's directed by Polanski, who's got a bit of a shadow, as we know, of what happened. But it's such a for 1960s, that is a film way ahead. It's just, and the way it's directed, the way it's filmed, the acting, and that is what is frightening about. I'd never seen anything like that. It's an incredible film, really is. Yeah,
Probably do a 4K soon. Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, it needs a 4K release, definitely. Yeah,
So what
I
about
think a lot of people would really appreciate that as a film even more. I think,
probably would.
Important film.
Yeah, Matt, what about yourself? Anything that scared you as a youngster?
I mean, The Omen 2, actually, that I think more so The Omen 2 than the first one, because obviously the first one was more about him as a baby, but in the second film it was more about him as he was the young boy, wasn't he, in the second
Yeah,
film?
he's in the army. He's about like 15 in the
That's
second
right.
one.
And
You've got the scene where the birds come and peck the woman's eyes out.
Yeah, far more menacing. Patrick Troughton was in that one as well, wasn't he? Or was that the
I
first?
think first one, Patrick Troughton.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of the first film then. I do remember being, that scene with Patrick Troughton. That was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But I mean, all three of the Omens, like they sort of, really scary. And I can remember going to see The Exorcist, because obviously when I was a teenager, it was banned. It was banned for many years, wasn't it? And then I remember going to where I lived, the local cinema, to see it, and I was probably about 19 or 20. And feeling quite disturbed coming out of that film.
Cool. Me myself, and it's going to be quite cliche. I do remember seeing The Omen when I was young, and it was the stuff about the devil had a profound effect on me. It did. The idea, I hadn't seen all of The Omen, just bits of it, but the idea of the devil had a profound effect. But my answer, I was 8 years old when I first saw Nightmare on Elm Street. It would have been on a dodgy VHS pirate copy that my brother had got hold of. And for me, the idea of, because that psychologically, I think that film, the idea of trying to escape something that comes at you in your dreams, and you're never going to be able to escape that because you've got to go asleep. That whole aspect of Nightmare on Elm Street did freak me out as an 8-year-old after watching it when I shouldn't have done, knowing that I've got to go to bed at night and turn the lights off. Was quite a sort of scary thing, but that's quite a cliche answer, isn't it? Come on. So, Dr. Impossible and the Count Punch 1984. How you doing? Hope he gives quite some decent insight, this fella, into stuff. Mr. Justice Moreland, who oversaw the Bulger case, suggested exposure to violent videos may have influenced the boys' behaviour during the murder. May being vague. That's why I said may. The Suzanne Capper case was another. Yep. Yeah. I think they just wanted a scapegoat for it, didn't they? Really?
Well, the only evidence they had for Child's Play 3 was that in the local video shop in the history, the dad had rented it at some point.
That's
There was
right.
no
Yeah.
evidence they had watched
was-
it or anything. So that was basically the level of policing back then. Oh, he rented that video, that'll do, case closed, that's why.
Yeah. So they must have seen it because he rented it a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
so
no,
there's-
exactly.
Yeah.
No, just a nonsense. isn't it?
Yeah. There we go. Richard, how you doing, Richard? Hope you're well. There was a lot of heavy debate about First Blood and the Hungerford Massacre in 1987. I do think that people have become desensitized to violence in films and TV. Just look at the European output.
Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it? Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the more we see, we become desensitized.
Yeah, we do.
Point.
We do, because back in the day, Hammer horror would have been scary to people now. Now that's just tame and, it's nothing.
It definitely
is it?
depends on what era you grew up in as to what scared you, especially when you were younger, obviously. You know,
Absolutely.
I can imagine if I seen some of the movies now when I was younger, it would be even worse than some of the ones I seen back then. But
I mean, me personally, I can't say nothing for the European output because I haven't seen none. Bumper, you've got a good insight into that, and Ian possibly.
yeah.
So is the European output a lot? Is there a vast difference? Is there a lot of is it more violent? Is it more?
It's more
Is there
it's more
something to it?
visceral. But the French are very famous for it because between about 1998 and about 2006, there was a subgenre, if you want to call it, French extreme. And what they do is they turn the violence up a notch. But what they managed to do is really make you invest in the characters. Some of the female actresses they had in these movies, like Martyrs and Frontiers and Inside, they give their all to the film, and they're such emotional performances. Some of them even have obviously agreed to have their head shaved off. They're crawling through shit and piss the entire film, and it's just so much commitment from them. And so like I was saying, we're Hostel. When you go into Hostel and you know what you're expecting, you want to see it. In these sort of French extreme films, you want the characters to survive like you would in a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. But when they come up and comes, it's a lot more visceral and a lot more like wince inducing. I don't know how they do it, but the French are very famous for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that stuff that's readily, you can see that all over here?
It's not bad. Alex Ajar, who done High Tension, which is one of the most famous ones, he went on to direct Crawl, The Hills Have Eyes. He's done loads of films. He works for Netflix, Alex Ajar. You probably heard of Xavier Gens, I think. He's another one. He done episodes of, I want to say, Game of Thrones and stuff like that. So, the reason why the subgenre died out is because all the directors, they made such great films, they moved on to Hollywood and the subgenre died. But but European horror is my bag. I could recommend you maybe 10, 20 European films across the last 3 decades, maybe 4 decades. And, if you could put up with the subtitles and get on board with them, they're films like.
Cool. So what's your opinion on this next film?
Hang on. Where's my media book collection? Hang on.
Hey, I've not seen Zombieva.
Yeah, hang on. I do collect German media books. I got Zombieva, Wicked. Where's the best way to get it? So there it is. There, it's like a nice media book release as well. Like it's only Blu-ray, not 4K. But actually, this film goes somewhere where you wouldn't expect. There's a bit of a twist to this, and it got me, and it made the film Wicked. So
Really?
It's got a sci-fi B-movie title, but really good film.
Okay, all right. One to watch then.
Well, if you ever come across it. It's
I'll tell
different
you
the way it pulls the rug from under you. You don't, you think you know where it's going, and then you don't. In a good way. Practical effects are awesome in it.
The other day I was watching Channel Horror Hands. Do you subscribe
He's
to
good.
him?
Yeah.
He's brilliant, yeah. And he does this video every now and again where he calls it Horror Hands Beach. And he goes to a beach and he takes a load of films with him.
Yeah.
And his top 10 shark films, worst ones ever. And one of them was, what was it? Shark Exorcism.
Oh yeah, Shark Exorcism. Yeah,
It's,
Dope Shark as well.
it's one of the worst films ever done.
Yeah, just this, I don't know, computer generated
Shark
shark
Exorcism.
floating through the walls. Hilarious.
Yeah.
But, aging would like that one.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
No, when I watch shark films, I generally just stick to something that's plausible.
Yeah.
I don't sort of step into the territory of like zombie shark or ghost shark or whatever sort of things there are.
Sharknado.
Yeah,
I don't mind the old. I don't mind the genetically modified ones in Deep Blue Sea, but that's about as far as I want to stretch, really.
yeah, that's for me. When it steps out, if it's a shark in water doing what shark does,
Yeah.
even if it's in a lake, I don't care. I'll watch it. But if
Yeah.
it's going to the like Sharktopus, things like that,
That's what it's like. Yeah.
Or, you know.
Yeah.
So Dr. Impossible says the Era 11 Book of Rosemary's Baby is a lot worse than the film. I wouldn't know.
No.
Derek from Pure Hangout.
Hi there.
How you doing, Derek? You all right? Hope you're well. Pete. How you doing, Pete?
Nintendo guy.
And this is the last message here, so I'm going to leave it there with messages because we only got 5 minutes left. Any takers for the new Exorcist movie to be directed by David Gordon Green, who done the new Halloween trilogy? I didn't even know they were doing a new Exorcist. That's new.
Yeah, they're doing 3 movies. Yeah, and it is David Gordon Green doing it. You know. Remember what I said at the start of the conversation that these horror reboots work better when you get someone who loves the genre, who's got a background in it. Well, David Gordon Green haven't. He directed comedies, stoner comedies, Pineapple Express, things like Danny McBride in and James Franco, and then he moved on to Halloween. Do you know Halloween, the new ones, is part wrote by Danny McBride.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So they haven't got a background in it. They just want to sort of get, they want to sort of create something within this fandom that they're going to be lauded for, but they haven't got the credentials to give us what we need.
No.
So no, I'm not looking forward to it at all.
Yeah, because Danny McBride's sort of taken the sort of same direction as Seth Rogen, isn't he?
Yeah.
Doing stuff behind the screen.
I like Danny McBride. He's hilarious, but should he be penning a Halloween movie? I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think he's great as I think he's quite amusing in films when I see him in them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's when you think Danny McBride Halloween, you're like, okay, that's a bit.
Yeah, it's weird.
So I have to say with Seth Rogen, when I hear Seth Rogen's like producing or writing on, he done Preacher, which is based on a comic book, and I think did he have something to do with the boys? I'm not sure he might have done.
Maybe, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I have the same thing with him when I hear that his name's connected to Superhero Fair, and I'm like,
yeah, no,
okay, it doesn't exactly excite me when I hear these names attached to this stuff.
But all I wanted to say is, sorry, I know I'm rambling on, but I know you want to finish in the 2 hours. I just wanted to say one of the main joys of being a horror fan, and one of the main reasons I heard this on a horror documentary a while ago, and I always bring it up because it stuck with me, is that unlike other genres of movies, in horror movies, the directors and the people who make horror movies, they're always looking for that fresh idea. They're always looking for that new extreme bit of violence that you haven't seen before. They're always trying to better themselves. So what that does create is this sort of, you're in this zone where, they're always trying to better each other. So the movies coming out, they're trying to be better than the ones before, where in like action genre and drama genre and whatever, they haven't got this sort of competition between the directors, if you know what I mean. There's so much reputation at stake when you're a horror movie maker and trying to find that next sort of Blair Witch or that next Paranormal Activity. And I just think that's what keeps the genre fresh for the last 40, 50 years. It's constantly evolving because it's always looking to better itself. Whereas other film genres, I'm not really sure they do that.
So do you think that I mean, that's got me thinking. Do you think that's the reason behind films like what's the one where they were sewed to one another's anuses?
Yeah, Human Centipede, yeah.
That's it. Yeah. See, now I saw that when I did see it. No, I think I saw some of the first one and fast forwarded through it. I didn't watch it all. And that was just sort of, what's this about? I've heard the stuff. Now, I watched that and I'm thinking, what's got to be in the mind of the person to actually sit down and think this stuff up? How sick have you got to be to think this stuff up? Do you think that is the case then?
Yeah.
Or do you think it's just the case of I've got to produce something that's not been seen before and here's an idea?
100%, 110%. But you still got to have that storyline on and that little grip on reality to make it a film. You know, you can't. Some film directors, they will direct a film based on an idea of a kill, and it just doesn't work, does it? You know, I mean, you've got to be able to build the film around it. But yeah, certainly that guy's been lying in bed one night before they go through to be if we sewed 3 people together, asked them out, let's see how we can make a movie out of that, and he managed it. I was thinking, I'd imagine that was a Video Nasty in the 80s. Bloody God, they wouldn't know where to put themselves if they sat there and watched that or the second one. Jesus, they think bloody Anthropophagus is bloody category 1. Gee whiz.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that is what it's like. You know, that there's that fresh competition there. You know, so
Yeah, cool.
it is there. Like.
All right. So, like I said, we're at the end anyway. So, final thoughts from anyone? Bumper?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I love talking about horror on some of the streams. I may be a little bit more quieting down, but when it's talking about horror, I may not go all day. So just thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it.
No, that's great. That's great. It's great having you on board and having your insight. It's given me stuff to think about, certainly, and some ideas to maybe go and visit.
And if you want any recommendations on some foreign horror, just to sort of dip your toes in the water, let me know.
Yeah, I will, mate. I will. Certainly will. It'll be interesting. Ian, any final thoughts from you? And thank you for your input as well. It's always...
I just... I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I like people's ideas. I've always been sort of person who just enjoys other people's ideas. And I just make one thought, and it's just an obvious thought. There's nothing wrong if you don't like something. You know, you don't even have to make an excuse. If you don't like something, that's it. You don't like it. Why people have to, you know, make such a big thing because you don't like something, or you do like something, you know, why? And horror is exactly like everything else, you know. I mean, it's like the Centipede movies. You probably might expect, oh, he'll probably like those. I'm not really that interested in them, you know. It's just how it is, you know. But there's not always it doesn't have to be a reason, does there? You just don't like something. No. That's it.
What about yourself?
Me? Yeah, it's been good. Obviously, listening to the Bumper and Ian sort of, you know, viewpoint on horror. It's been good. It's interesting to, you know, have that sort of different sort of ideas, and it's been really good.
Yeah, no, it has. It's been insightful because, like I said, I would have never really done a horror one. It was a couple of weeks ago. I said to Matt I might do one that's more focused on horror and get some people on who sort of live it more so than what I do and Matt does himself, and try and explore, you know, what it is, the appeal and all that sort of thing. It's been great. It's been eye-opening. There's certainly some stuff that I might go away and visit just to see, you know, to explore it a bit more for myself. And I will come to you both for some ideas. Zombieva probably being the first one. But no, it's been great. So everyone watching, thank you, and thank you for the messages. Go and subscribe to Matt, Bumper, Ian. If you want to leave your links in the comments after when the video is up and when you can see it, then do that. That'll be great, and get people over to your channels. And let's do it again sometime. I enjoyed talking about this. Even though it's not my forte, it's been great. So I'm going to end this broadcast now, but obviously stay on because we've got the back room bit. So see you later, everyone. Thanks again for your comments, and goodbye.
Bye.